Formula One has always been sold as the pinnacle of motorsport, a place where the smartest engineers, the bravest drivers, and the fastest machines on Earth collide. But every now and then, something happens that makes even Formula One stop and say, "This has gone too far." Because throughout its history, F1 has produced cars and technologies so effective, so clever, and so devastatingly fast that they didn't just win races. They terrified rivals, embarrassed governing bodies, and forced the rule makers to step in and pull the plug. These are the cars that didn't just push the limits, they broke them. For decades, Formula One has lived in a constant war between innovation and control. Engineers are paid to read the rulebook not as a list of restrictions, but as a puzzle filled with loopholes. And whenever one team finds a clever interpretation, the rest of the grid scrambles to copy it, until the sport itself is forced to intervene. One of the most famous examples of this came not from raw power, but from something far more subtle: control. In the mid-2000s, Renault faced a problem that seemed unsolvable. To keep their front wing as close to the ground as possible, they were forced to run extremely stiff suspension. The result was speed, but also instability. The car bounced violently under braking and acceleration, unsettling the driver at the worst possible moments. Most teams would have accepted the compromise. Renault didn't. Instead, their engineers introduced a deceptively simple device hidden inside the nose of the car, a free-moving mass suspended in a cylinder. As the car pitched and bounced, the mass moved in opposition, stabilizing the chassis and keeping the aerodynamic platform perfectly balanced. It didn't look dramatic. It didn't sound revolutionary, but it worked brilliantly. Lap times fell. Tire wear improved. Confidence grew. And soon, everyone else copied it. That was when the alarms went off. What started as a clever mechanical solution quickly became a full-scale development arms race. And once again, the governing body stepped in, declaring movable aerodynamic devices illegal. The innovation was gone, not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. But mechanical tricks were only the beginning. If there is one technology that perfectly represents Formula One's fear of automation, it's traction control. At its core, traction control is simple. It prevents wheel spin by electronically managing power delivery. In road cars, it's considered a safety feature. In Formula One, it was seen as something far more dangerous, a way to remove the human element. The argument was clear. Rich teams could develop better software, smaller teams couldn't. And suddenly, talent behind the wheel mattered less than code inside a computer. So it was banned. Except, it wasn't really gone. Throughout the 1990s, rumors swirled. Teams were accused of hiding traction control systems deep inside their electronics, buried in lines of code that were almost impossible to police. Investigations were launched. Suspicious software was found. But proof? That was another matter. The controversy reached its peak when championships were won under a cloud of doubt, victories achieved not just through skill, but through technology that might not have been entirely legal. Eventually, the sport admitted defeat. Policing software was simply too difficult. Traction control returned, only to be banned again later, once standardized electronics made enforcement possible. In Formula One, sometimes banning something isn't about fairness. It's about control. Other innovations didn't rely on electronics at all. Some were so obvious, so brutally effective, that even the rule makers struggled to explain why they were illegal. Take McLaren's second brake pedal. On the surface, it seemed harmless, a pedal that allowed the driver to brake one rear wheel independently, helping rotate the car through corners. It didn't add power, it didn't add downforce, it simply gave the driver more control. And yet, when McLaren began dominating, the protests came fast. What had once been declared legal was suddenly reclassified as a steering system and banned almost overnight. Politics played their part, as they always do in Formula One. But by the time the system disappeared, the damage was done. The advantage had already reshaped a championship. Then there are the technologies that didn't just help drivers. They made the cars feel almost alive. Active suspension is one of the most extreme examples. Instead of relying on springs and dampers alone, these cars used computer-controlled hydraulics to constantly adjust ride height, balance, and stability in real time. The result was astonishing. Cars that stayed perfectly flat through corners, cars that absorbed bumps effortlessly, cars that looked glued to the track. Drivers trusted the system. Engineers worshipped it. Rivals hated it. Critics argued it made driving too easy. Critics argued it made driving too easy, that it favored wealthy teams, that it turned Formula One into a technology contest instead of a test of skill. So, once again, the hammer fell. By the mid-1990s, active suspension, along with many electronic driver aids, was banned. Not because it failed, but because it worked too well. But nothing in Formula One history screams too fast, louder than the fan car. In the late 1970s, one designer decided wings weren't enough. Why rely on airflow when you could force it? The solution was outrageous. A giant fan mounted at the back of the car, sucking air from underneath and creating massive downforce regardless of speed. The car stuck to the track like nothing anyone had ever seen. It raced once, it won, and it vanished. Officially, the fan was there for cooling. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. The loophole was clever, the performance was undeniable, and the political pressure was immense. The car was retired before the rulebook even caught up. Sometimes dominance doesn't need a ban. Sometimes it just needs silence. Innovation didn't stop there. At one point, engineers even questioned whether 4 wheels were necessary at all. The 6-wheeled car appeared bizarre, almost comedic, until it started showing real potential. Smaller front tires reduced drag. Grip improved, and for a moment the idea seemed viable. But Formula One thrives on tradition as much as progress. And radical concepts that challenge the sport's identity rarely survive long. 6 wheels were outlawed, not because they failed, but because they made people uncomfortable. And then there was fuel. During the turbo era, power figures reached absurd levels. Engines produced numbers that still sound unreal today, thanks in part to exotic fuel blends designed to extract every last molecule of energy. Some mixtures bordered on chemical warfare. Others came with uncomfortable historical associations. All of them pushed performance into dangerous territory. Eventually, the governing body had seen enough. Turbochargers were banned. Fuel regulations tightened, and one of the wildest eras of Formula One came to an end. Even in modern Formula One, innovation hasn't stopped testing the boundaries. Not long ago, a steering wheel itself became a weapon. A system allowed drivers to adjust the angle of the front wheels on the fly, improving tire temperatures and straight-line stability. It was clever, elegant, legal for a while, but once again, the cost of development and the performance gap it created sealed its fate. It lasted 1 season. That was all it needed. Formula One is often described as a sport governed by rules, but history tells a different story. It is governed by fear. Fear of imbalance, fear of domination, fear that one idea might become so powerful that competition itself disappears. The cars that were basically banned weren't mistakes. They were warnings. Proof that when human creativity is left unchecked, speed becomes something dangerous, something uncontrollable, something that forces even the fastest sport in the world to slow itself down. And yet, without these cars, Formula One wouldn't be Formula One. Because every ban, every controversy, and every outlawed innovation leaves behind one undeniable truth. The next forbidden idea is already being built,